The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the fields when the storm broke. Thunder rumbled like a warning, the air crackling with electricity. Farmer James stared at the open gate, his heart pounding. It had been left ajar all day, as if the universe itself was tempting him to make a decision that could change everything. He could almost hear the whispers of the wind teasing him. They seemed to ask. Millions of what-ifs danced in his mind. But this was not just any gate. It was a threshold to more than just the pasture beyond. It was a line between security and all those raw, wild possibilities that had stirred in him since childhood. As raindrops began to fall, splashing against the ground like the start of an epic tale, James stepped closer, his boots sinking into the muddy earth. Should he leave it open, let fate sneak in, or should he shut it tight, protect what was his and embrace the comfort of routine? What lay beyond that gate wasn't just grass or distant hills. It was freedom, the unknown. But who would really dare to walk through? Every creature in the wild, every stray thought, turned into shadows looming behind the gate, daring him to act. The wind howled, bringing with it a chill that was both exhilarating and frightening. Memories flooded his mind, the faces of his family, the sweat and toil of each harvest that kept their small farm alive. Each moment had anchored him here, and now with the gate hanging open, all he could see was the chaos beyond. There would be no way to ensure they would be safe. But still, something about that wide-open space beckoned him. He saw it in the eyes of the old horse, Belle, who stood at the edge of the enclosure, nostrils flaring. She had always been restless, longing for more than the fenced-in life they led. James recalled the wild freedom he felt when he would run through the tall grass as a boy, chased by the thrill of possibility. Another gust of wind rattled through the trees, sending a shiver down his spine. James took a deep breath, steeling himself. He had always believed in caution, in the certainty of hard work and routine. But now, with the crackle of the storm weaving uncertainty into the air, he felt the weight of his choices pressing down, pushing him toward that open gate. Could he really close it? Was he frightened of what lay beyond? Or was it something deeper, an aching sense that his life, too, was more than just those fields stretching for miles? It was more than an invitation, it was a command. But then the storm cracked open, rain pouring down, drowning the soil, drowning the air. James jolted. The gate swung slightly in the wind. It was just a piece of metal, yet it felt alive with intention. This was about more than just a gate, more than just a storm. It was a battle between safety and risk, between the life he had built and the dreams he had buried beneath a lifetime of responsibilities. His heart raced as he envisioned disaster, all of it slipping through his fingers like sand. Suddenly, a sound broke through the downpour, a low, haunting call like the ghost of something long forgotten. He froze, his heart pounding louder than thunder. Was it an animal, or perhaps something more sinister? The darkness seemed to stretch and twist, and he imagined the coyote pack that had slunk through before, searching for easy prey. Shadows crept closer. Perhaps his fears were not unfounded. With a surge of determination, James rushed forward, the mud sucking at his boots. He reached for the gate, fingers trembling. The voices inside his mind screamed for him to close it. In that instant, he glanced back over his shoulder. The safety of home was right there, glowing warmly against the storm, filled with family laughter and everyday joys. But then he remembered his daughter, Lily, her dreams of wild adventures, searching for hidden treasures in the world, wanting to know more than just the rows of corn and beans. Each day had become a cycle of tending, harvesting, and worrying. His heart ached in recognition of how profoundly he had sheltered not just his crops but his family's spirit. Was he really protecting them, or imprisoning them in his caution? The rain turned from a gentle fall to a torrential rush. He gripped the cold steel of the gate, wrestling with himself. Memories of laughter filled the air, each one a reminder that the heart yearns for more than safety. He thought, the weight of his choices heavy like the clouds above. Lightning split the sky again, and in that blinding light he saw something. It wasn't just darkness out there. It was vast, rich, filled with possibilities he had ignored for too long. Perhaps it held dangers, yes, but also new discoveries, friendships, and raw, unfiltered magic. No sooner had that thought entered his mind than the wind howled louder, demanding his attention. The earth shook with a drumbeat of nature's fury. He took a breath amidst chaos. This wasn't just a storm, it was part of life, wild and unpredictable, brimming with color and sound. The farm could survive more than he realized. James stepped back from the gate, uncertainty intertwining with newfound courage. Lily's laughter echoed in his heart. It sounded like freedom. He wanted her to know the thrill of chasing sunsets, the taste of adventure. The opportunity for challenges and risks was right in front of him. Maybe he'd been thinking too narrowly all this time. The storm shouted around him, roaring like a beast. But James was no longer just a farmer hoarding safety. He felt the wildness in his blood, that same thrill that had once brought him joy. He laughed, a sound that mingled with the wind, a sound that reflected resilience and hope. And he closed the gate, but not with fear. He shut it as a promise to protect his family from the dangers outside, but not at the cost of their dreams. Behind that barrier, he decided a new life would begin, one where they could explore that world together, guided but not confined. The rain continued to fall, but this time it felt like a cleansing ritual. Each drop washed away the heaviness of the past, leaving his heart lighter, ready for the unknown, ready to embrace both risks and rewards together. In that moment, the storm was not an enemy, it was part of the journey. With every storm that came, they could find their way through it as a family, stronger and more united. No longer would the gate hold him back. It became a landmark, a symbol of commitment to never forget what lay beyond it. A place of refuge and adventure combined. James smiled, turning back toward the house. Inside, he could hear Lily calling for him, her imagination weaving stories of distant lands and hidden treasures. He would join her, he would nurture that adventurous spirit, and together they would broaden the horizons of their little world, discovering how limitless life could truly be. As thunder rolled away into the distance and the storm began to relent, a rainbow peeked through the clouds, stretching across the sky. It felt like a promise from the universe itself. The farmer who had once locked his gate knew today he had chosen to open a much bigger one, the one to life's greatest adventures. And perhaps, just perhaps, there lay the true power of the choice he had made, to close that first gate but open so many more. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm orange light across the fields, when Farmer Henry stood at the edge of his property, staring at the open gate. The latch had swung loose, almost as if it was waiting for him to make a choice. But what was once a simple decision now loomed like a storm cloud overhead. Behind him, the barn echoed with familiar sounds, the gentle clucking of chickens, the soft snorts of happy pigs, the rustling of hay. It was a sanctuary, a world where Henry had poured his sweat and dreams. But beyond that gate lay the unknown, a wild expanse filled with uncertainty and untamed possibilities. As he stared, memories flooded his mind. He could still picture his little feet racing out that very gate, laughing as a child, chasing butterflies or exploring secret places in the tall grass. Back then, freedom was a vibrant, pulsing thing, full of life and adventure. But as time passed, each responsibility added weight to his shoulders, pulling him back into the safety of the routine. The wind picked up, swirling around him, rustling through the oak trees, filling the air with a promise of change. He could feel it curling around his ankles, daring him to take a step, to venture forth. Was the storm building inside him or out there in the horizon? Fear and longing coiled together, battling for his attention. And then he heard it, a soft whinny from the barn. It was Daisy, his old mare, pacing nervously. She had always been a wild spirit, bursting with energy. Henry remembered the day he brought her home, how she had danced freely, a reminder of the life he once embraced. Now the chaotic energy that had once drawn him to her faded into the background of predictable chores and familiar paths. He whispered, his voice barely breaking the silence. Daisy snorted in response, her dark eyes glistening, filled with understanding. Was she asking him to open that gate, to let them both run wild once again? A shiver ran down his spine at the thought. In that moment, the sun slipped behind a cloud and shadows danced over the fields. A sudden gust of wind swept through, as if the world itself was urging him to decide. The gate creaked on its hinges, and a deep dread crept into Henry's chest. What if he left it open? What if disaster slipped through? After all, he had seen it before, the way the world outside could be unforgiving. But something inside him ignited, a flicker of rebellion that lit up his hopes. Perhaps the wildness beckoned not just for him, but for all the parts of him he had buried beneath responsibilities. As a child, he had danced with the wind, chased the horizon, and climbed trees that touched the sky. Now standing there, he felt like a statue, frozen in a moment that could hold so much potential. Yet the fear whispered back, anchoring him in doubt. "You'll lose everything," it chanted, a mantra fed by years of watching neighbors who had ventured too far only to return with tales of sorrow. Those voices echoed in his head, reminding him of the natural order of the comfort found in predictability. He took a step back, heart heavy. Perhaps it was better to keep the gate closed to protect his little world from any chaos. He asked himself, imagining their disapproving looks. But he wasn't just a farmer, he was a father, a husband, a provider. Every choice he made ripples through the lives of others. His family depended on him. But as he shifted, a spark of defiance ignited within him. He thought of Sarah, his daughter, with her wild curls and sparkling eyes. How she often looked up at him, filled with the dreams of a child, wanting to see the world beyond their land. She wanted to climb trees, to feel the wind run through her hair, to breathe in the sweetness of freedom. How many times had he said, "Not now, Sarah"? The wind howled around him again, stirring the leaves like an orchestra tuning for a grand performance. It whispered insidiously. It challenged him, taunted him. The gate, swinging open in the breeze, felt ominous and inviting all at once. A flash of moonlight peeked through the clouds, illuminating the path outside. The world beyond seemed to shimmer. He could almost hear laughter, feel the pulse of a vibrant life just out of reach. Instead, he felt the weight of tradition pressing down on him like a thick fog. Safety offered comfort, but what had it cost him? It was then that Daisy whinnied again, stronger this time, pulling him back from the clutches of fear. The connection sparked something deep inside, a yearning for the wild, untamed joy of life. Maybe it was time to reclaim that adventurous spirit, not just for himself, but for his daughter too. With newfound resolve, he took a step forward, but a shadow flickered across his mind, a memory of how quickly things could change. Friends and neighbors had ventured too far, only to be met with disaster, the droughts that had wiped out crops, the wild animals that had wreaked havoc on fragile lives. Had he not learned from their stories? But the thought of Sarah, standing alone at the gate, wondering why her father wouldn't let her be free, pulled at him like a lifeline tangled in the storm. Would she ever forgive him for holding her back? The thought sent a pulse of urgency through his veins. What would he tell her when she asked why he hadn't tried? Taking a deep breath, Henry reached for the gate, feeling the cold metal against his skin. He paused, the weight of hesitation heavy in the air. He could hear Sarah's laughter in the distance, see her bright spirit flicker in front of him, begging for something more. Perhaps it was time to reframe what it meant to be a provider, to protect their dreams, to cultivate the soil of adventure alongside the crops. He glanced towards the barn. A ruckus erupted within, chickens flapping wildly, swine snorting in delight, as if they sensed the shift in the air. There was magic in the chaos, an electric energy that stirred hope within. "No one will find us if we stay coiled up here," he whispered to himself, feeling invigorated by the thought. With a final breath, he pushed the gate open wide. The creaking echoed like a starting gun, launching him into a new realm. Rain began to sprinkle around him, gentle yet insistent. The world beyond came alive, with colors unfurling like freshly blossomed flowers eager to greet the sun. Daisy stepped forward, eager to lead the way. They crossed that threshold together into the unknown, a wild freedom stretching out before them. Every step felt intoxicating, each blade of grass a reminder that life happened beyond the confines of safety. The rain fell around them, washing away doubts and fears. Henry felt liberated, his heart racing with every drop that splashed against his skin. He shouted, laughter bursting forth. Then he thought of Sarah, imagining her joy as she joined them on this grand adventure. His mind raced ahead, plotting the path they would take. They could explore the forest, discover streams filled with glistening fish, or climb hills that touched the sky. In that moment, life opened up like a vast horizon, breathtaking in its expanse. Suddenly, a voice rang out from behind, clear and bright. "Dad." It was Sarah, her curiosity leading her to seek him out. Henry's heart swelled with joy and pride. She was eager to step into this adventure with him. He called, waving her over. He watched as she bounded across the yard, eyes bright with excitement, totally unrestrained by the fears that had held him captive for so long. And there it was, the heart of the matter. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the legacy he would pass on, the lessons of courage he'd instill. As she reached him, he embraced her tightly, a whirlwind of love and warmth. They stood together, eyes wide, staring at the world beyond that gate. The clouds had parted, revealing a brilliant beam of sunshine breaking through the rain. Sarah exclaimed, bouncing on her toes, "Can we explore there?" "Yes, we can," Henry replied, feeling a sense of liberation wash over him as he nodded. "We can go anywhere." Hand in hand, they stepped into that wild world, racing into the embrace of the unknown. Each footfall resonated with promises of new beginnings. Laughter danced in the air, mingling with the fresh scent of rain-soaked earth as they ventured forth. In closing that gate behind them, Henry had not just closed off a space. He had opened a doorway to discovery for himself and Sarah, a bond forged in shared experiences and adventures untold. The freedom outside now beckoned brightly, and together they would forge a path filled with joy and wonder, a legacy nothing could cage. With every leap and bound, they found undeniable truth. Life was waiting, eager and wild, beyond the gate that once felt so intimidating. They were finally free. The storm rolled in quickly, casting dark clouds over the farm. Farmer Bill stood in his field, watching the wind twisting through the grass like a living thing, something wild and untamed. He had always been a man of the land, a man who respected the predictable rhythms of nature. But today, his gaze was fixed on the open gate at the far end of the property, swaying slightly in the wind, as if begging him to make a choice. It had been a long day of work tending to the crops, fixing fences, making sure the cows were settled before the rain hit. But that gate, wide open, loomed larger in his mind than anything else. Just beyond it lay a world of possibilities, where fields turned into forests and rivers met the horizon. But it was also a world filled with uncertainty, where danger lurked behind each shadow. "Just leave it be," he muttered to himself, the words hanging heavy in the air. But even as he said it, a spark of doubt flickered in his mind. He remembered the last time he had left that gate open. It was years ago, when he had lost a prized goat to a hungry coyote. The memory hit him like a punch to the gut. He couldn't risk it again. Lightning flashed, momentarily illuminating the rolling clouds, and Bill's heart raced. He stepped forward, the solid earth giving way to mud under his boots. He wanted to close that gate, to keep everything he had worked for safe and sound within the confines of his farm. But there, just beyond the gate, life beckoned him, a siren call of adventure and uncertainty. He thought. But that thought quickly drowned in a tide of what-ifs, a mental storm brewing inside him. What if it brought chaos, destruction, untamed animals, floodwaters, or worse? He could feel the weight of his responsibilities pressing hard against his chest. His family depended on him. His children, Amelia and Ben, they needed stability. They had grown up with stories of the outside world, tales of vast lands that went on forever, of journeys that tested the soul. But what good were those stories if they couldn't live them? The wind whipped around him, slapping against his face like a warning bell. A shiver ran through his body. In that moment, he felt trapped, caught in a tug-of-war between safety and the wild yearning for the unknown. He turned to look toward the house, where the warmth of home radiated. Lily was there, perched on the porch with a book in her lap, her curly hair bouncing in the wind. She waved at him with a smile that lit up the dimming sky, offering a reminder of all the joy he sought to protect. "Dad," her voice echoed across the field, bright and innocent, cutting through the weighty thoughts that filled his mind. But he remained rooted in place, staring at the open gate as the wind howled around him. Lily's laughter floated to him, tinged with magic and longing, urging him to reclaim the adventurous spirit that had once driven him. As a child, he had danced in fields, chased fireflies, and explored every nook and cranny of the farm. What had happened to that boy? With a sudden burst of energy, Bill took a step forward. His heart raced as he approached the gate, feeling as if he were standing on the edge of a great precipice. The ground beneath him felt electric. He could hear possibilities crackling in the air. But as he reached the gate, doubt reared its head again. What if he opened it and never came back? Then came the thunder, a deep rumble that resonated in his bones. It shook him, reminding him of just how small he was in the face of nature's might. Did he really want to trade the security he knew for the unpredictable world outside those gates? He thought of his family's faces, how their lives rested on his decisions. In that moment, a memory flickered to life. He recalled a summer long ago, chasing fireflies with a group of friends, laughter spilling into the night. Everything felt boundless, but those days had slipped away. His responsibilities had grown heavy, chaining him to the land as surely as the roots of the old oak tree gripped the earth. Bill turned back toward the house, ready to let the wind sweep away his reckless thoughts. Yet as he did, something caught his eye. Across the field, hidden in the golden grass, was a silhouette of fox. It was watching him, eyes glinting with an intelligence that felt almost human. In that moment, it wasn't just an animal. It was a creature of freedom, of instinct, roaming unhindered through the world. "Maybe it's not so dangerous after all," he murmured, struck by the fox's grace. It felt like a sign, an emblem of the life he had once embraced, a life of curiosity and exploration. The fox darted away into the brush, disappearing just as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind a lingering sense of what could be. Before he knew it, the storm clouds began to roll in, darkening the sky even further. Rain would pour, relentless and heavy. Bill glanced back to the house. Lily had set her book aside and stood up, concern etched across her young face. She had those big, trusting eyes that reflected all the love and hope he fought to shield. She called again, her voice cutting through the tension. The memory of that joyous child reminded him what he had lost, not just his own adventurous spirit, but hers as well. How many times had he chased away her dreams with his worries? In that flash of insight, Bill's heart thundered with realization. This wasn't just about protecting his farm. It was a chance to teach his children about courage, about the beauty of risk. He wanted to nurture their spirits, even if it meant occasionally facing the unknown. But doubt still whispered in his ear. It taunted. What if they went out and got hurt? What if danger lay in the wilds beyond? He shouted into the wind, surprising himself. With a surge of resolve stronger than the storm rolling in, Bill rushed to the gate and pushed it wide open. The creaking sound echoed around him, a battle cry of defiance against the fears that had held him captive for so long. The gust of wind rushed at him, sending a thrill through his body. It felt like freedom, it felt like life. He turned and called to his daughter. "Lily," she asked, eyes wide with excitement. "Anywhere." The joy in her voice set his spirit alight as she scrambled down the porch steps, racing toward him. Bill watched her run, feeling a warmth swell inside. It had been so long since he had opened his heart to the possibilities outside his door. Shadows closed in behind them as they dashed into the storm, the warm rain soaking into their clothes but invigorating their spirits. Lily shouted, twirling in wild circles, arms stretched wide like the branches of the oak tree, embracing the rain. Bill laughed, a sound he hadn't made in ages, feeling the joyous energy radiate from his daughter. It filled his heart with a burst of hope, reminding him why he had fought to keep her safe in the first place. As they raced through the pasture, they could feel the wind pushing against them, as if urging them to go further. Sparks of adventure flickered in the air, igniting Bill's long-buried dreams. He remembered the tales of wild rivers, hidden caves, and towering mountains. Imagine how many adventures awaited them if only they dared to seek them out. The rain fell heavier now, drenching them, mixing laughter with splashes as they leaped through puddles that painted the earth into a canvas of chaos and joy. Bill glanced around, the world transforming before his eyes. Everything looked vibrant and alive, colors blending and merging as nature danced in the storm's embrace. And in that moment, he realized his fears had been misplaced, more about him than the real dangers of the world outside. The animals still roamed, the unpredictable lived just beyond the gate. But the real danger lay in staying close, in never letting his spirit roam, never letting his children discover their own. They paused, breathing heavily, hearts racing from the thrill they had chased. "Thank you, Dad," Lily said, wide-eyed with wonder as raindrops danced on her cheeks. He asked, bewildered by her gratitude. "For letting the gate be open. I've always wanted to explore." Her words struck him, resonating deeply, pulling at the very core of his being. Bill knelt beside her, their faces inches apart, soaking in that moment. "You deserve the world, Lily, not just safety." She grinned, transforming the rain-soaked landscape into a magical kingdom of adventure. Her laughter echoed in his ears, resonating through the storm, wrapping around him like a warm embrace. Together, hand in hand, they ventured forward into the world beyond the gate, where tall grass swayed and flowers bowed in the wind. Bill felt lighter, every step extracting the burdens of the past he had held so tightly. They wandered off the beaten path, where the land whispered secrets of its own, inviting them to listen. Lily spotted something, a cluster of bright yellow wildflowers at the edge of the meadow. "Look, Dad," she exclaimed, rushing over to kneel in the damp earth. "They certainly are," he replied, a smile stretching across his face. He joined her, kneeling in the grass, soaking in the scene as if it were a dream come true. The wild beauty around them felt infinite, each bloom like a new possibility unfurling in the light of adventure. As they gathered flowers together, Bill realized the storm had rumbled past, leaving behind a sparkling calm. The sky began to clear, revealing a brilliant canvas painted with hues of orange and gold as the sun began to set. He could feel the heartbeat of the land around them, vibrant and alive. Lily said, her eyes sparkling with wonder. "Absolutely. We can visit that grove we always talked about," he replied, feeling the thrill surge within him like a tide of warmth. They had ventured into the unknown, and it hadn't swallowed them whole, it had embraced them. As they stood together, the wildflowers cradled in their hands, Bill took a deep breath of the fresh, rain-kissed air. "Not only did I keep you safe, but I set us both free," he thought, watching the horizon stretch endlessly before them. With each passing moment, he felt a weight lift, a burden shed. The open gate may have beckoned fear, but it also offered the greatest gift of all, the chance to rediscover what it meant to truly live, to embrace every flicker of adventure that lay waiting just beyond. Turning back, they headed home, the warm glow of the farmhouse in the distance reassuring and inviting. But this time, it felt different. The gate that had once been so daunting was now a symbol of new adventures, a reminder that life lived within the walls of fear and caution could become more than mere survival. Bill knew he would never close that gate again. Instead, he would replace it with open arms, ready to welcome whatever life may bring. Because in risking the unknown, they had found something far more precious than security. They had found each other, a bond woven together by dreams forged through courage. The storm broke the horizon like a dam bursting, releasing torrents of rain that fell in heavy sheets over the sprawling fields. Farmer Mike stood in his barn, peering out through the open door at the gate swaying in the wind. The gate led to the wild beyond, a place full of possibilities, but also the potential for chaos. He remembered the last time he had left it open. His precious sheep had wandered off, led by the scent of freedom and the lure of adventure. It had taken days to find them, and by then the flock had been spooked and restless, their wool soaked with fear. With every gust of wind, the gate creaked and groaned, almost as if it were alive, pleading with him to understand. Inside, he could hear his wife, Emma, calling for their children. The sound of laughter mixed with the smell of fresh bread wafting through the farm, grounding him in the warm familiarity of home. But that warmth was in stark contrast to the rumbling storm outside, and Mike felt a tension building in his chest. Each crack of thunder echoed like a challenge. What lay beyond that gate? Was it nothing more than a dark and dangerous wilderness? Yet the allure was undeniable, a hint of something vibrant, untamed, waiting to be explored. He remembered how, as a child, he had raced through fields with wide-eyed wonder, chasing dreams that felt just out of reach. But those days were long gone. Now he had responsibilities, a family to protect. Emma called again, her voice cutting through his turbulent thoughts. Her words tugged on his heart. He could almost see her, standing tall in the kitchen, flour dusting her hands, her eyes filled with laughter and warmth. But still, that open gate coaxed him, whispering promises of a world he hadn't dared to touch in years. With a deep breath, he stepped outside, mud squelching beneath his boots. Each step was a battle against instincts that shouted for safety, urging him to retreat to the comfort of the barn. But curiosity clawed at him. Was he destined to live his life behind closed doors, or would he risk stepping into the unknown? He approached the gate, feeling a rush of emotions: fear, nostalgia, excitement. As the rain poured down, it transformed the world around him into a shimmering landscape, glistening with possibilities. He thought, battling the notion with all the weight of his worries. The memory of losing those sheep weighed heavily on his mind. Yet the thought of living in perpetual caution felt even heavier. The wind howled, wrapping around him with insistence. It made him shudder, as if nature itself were pleading with him to let go of his fears. It struck him suddenly. Responsibility felt like a chain, while adventure beckoned like a soft breeze. The contrast was palpable, as vivid as the blue sky hidden behind the thunderheads, yet he couldn't ignore the pragmatic side of him. What if danger slipped through that opening? What if he lost more than just livestock this time? But deep down, he knew he didn't just fear loss, he feared stagnation. As he stood there, a flicker of lilac-colored wildflowers caught his eye just beyond the gate. They swayed gently, vibrant against the dim backdrop like whispers of life waiting to be grasped. He recalled a tale his grandmother once told him about those very flowers, how they grew best when left untouched by human hands, flourishing in the wild, free to reach for the sun. Maybe I've kept my life too manicured, he mused quietly, feeling a flicker of rebellion ignite within him. What if the wild meant not just danger, but also freedom to experience life fully? That was when he recognized the sound of laughter again, his children's joyous voices, pouring out into the storm like wild music. "Dad!" Amelia cried, her laughter ringing like a bell. It filled him with warmth but also guilt. What kind of father was he if he denied them this experience? Suddenly, the storm felt less like a foe and more like an ally seeking to free them, perhaps even teaching them resilience. That thought ignited a spark deep in his chest. Resilience didn't just come from hard work and caution. It also blossomed in the embrace of risk and adventure. "Maybe today is the day," he murmured, inching closer to the gate. He felt a rush of clarity wash over him as he touched the cold, damp wood. His heart raced with the thrill of the unheard, of paths yet to be taken. With one swift motion, Mike threw the gate open wider. The sound of creaking wood was louder than thunder, reverberating through the air, breaking chains that had long held him back. The rain poured even harder now, rivulets streaming down his face as he stepped through the threshold into the wild unknown, inviting his children to follow. Amelia shouted, dashing to his side, eyes bright with mischief and wonder. Her small fingers plucked the lilac blooms, as vibrant and curious as she was. At that moment, Mike realized something profound. This wasn't just about opening the gate. It was about embracing life, about the rich, messy experience of being alive. He felt the adrenaline surge as he caught Amelia's infectious excitement. He called to his son, who had been lingering uncertainly at the edge of the barn. The rain splattered against the earth around them, transforming the familiar landscape into something magical and unattainable. Ben replied, clutching his toy truck as if it were a lifeline. "Exactly," Mike laughed, matching his son's hesitant tone with playful encouragement. "Let's go on an adventure." With that, Ben's resolve crumbled. The lure of adventure, of running wild in the rain, sparked a brave smile that lit up his face. He dashed forward, and together they reveled in the freedom that the storm had ignited. The three of them raced through the fields, laughter ringing loud and bright against the rhythmic patter of the rain. They danced through puddles, splashed water high into the air, and spun around in chaotic circles, engulfed by joy and laughter. The weight that had once held Mike down fell away as he embraced the pure bliss of being with his children, of sharing in their insatiable curiosity. The world transformed before him, a canvas drenched in vibrant colors where they painted their laughter in bold strokes. Every splash in a puddle reminded him that life couldn't be quantified solely by responsibilities. It was filled with moments that could never be captured in a ledger. As they leaped and raced, Mike felt a surge of gratitude. Why hadn't he done this sooner? Standing at that gate, he had been paralyzed by fear, focused on what might happen instead of embracing the potential of what could be. The gate had been open, but fear had kept it closed in his heart for too long. The storm gradually began to ease, and sunlight began to break through the clouds, casting golden rays across the fields. The air grew fresher, filled with the earthy scent of rain-soaked soil. Mike looked at his two children, their faces radiant, their spirits wild and beautiful. He felt a sense of peace settling deep in his bones. "Let's build something out here," he announced suddenly, an idea rising up like the sun. "A fort." Amelia's eyes widened with excitement, the thought of a fort igniting her imagination like wildfire. She asked, bouncing on the balls of her feet, "Of course." Mike grinned as the three of them began to gather materials. The perfect twigs, pieces of grass, and whatever else they could find in the lush landscape. Amidst the laughter and chaos, Mike couldn't help but marvel at how quickly their lives had transformed in just one afternoon. The boundless energy of his children reminded him of the carefree days of his youth days, unburdened by worries, when life was a grand adventure waiting to unfold with each sunrise. As they worked together, constructing their fortress, Mike felt layers of responsibility slip away. Here, with Amelia and Ben, he rediscovered his adventurous spirit, the thrill of creation and collaboration. It was a reminder that they were not just keeping livestock alive. They were nurturing dreams, laughter, and the undeniable bond of family. Gradually, the fort took shape, an impromptu gathering of nature's finest offerings. It became an emblem of their shared adventure, a mission accomplished against the storm. They adorned it with their handcrafted flag made from a strip of cloth tied to a stick, waving proudly in the budding sunlight. Ben declared, striking a brave pose. Mike raised an imaginary sword, laughing along with his children, feeling the weight of the world lift from his shoulders. The sun continued to shine, fresh and warm, as they sat inside their newly built fort, recovering from their day of exploration. They recounted stories of their imaginary expeditions, victorious battles fought against invisible foes, and triumphant discoveries made in the rain-soaked fields. In that moment, Mike looked at his children, seeing the wonder in their eyes, the joy pulsing between them. He understood that this is what mattered most: the laughter shared, the memories created, and the courage found in risking the known for the unknown. That evening, as they returned to the farmhouse, drenched yet exhilarated, Mike took one last glance at the gate. It stood quietly, its hinges creaking gently in the fading light. That gate had been a barrier, keeping them safe but also locking away the spirit of discovery. But it had also opened the door to a world where moments of pure joy could exist, where adventures awaited just beyond its threshold. A world they could now explore together, hand in hand. And as they stepped back onto the familiar porch, leaving the rain behind, Mike knew that he would keep that gate open, not just because it led out to the wild beyond, but because it signified a new beginning and unbroken promise to embrace life, its challenges and adventures as a family. For in that promise lay not just safety, but real living, vibrant and wild as nature itself. In that open space, memories would thrive, and laughter would flow like the rivers that carved their worlds, navigating the storms to find the sun. The storm rolled across the horizon like a beast awakening from slumber. Dark clouds gathered, rumbling with the kind of fury that sent shivers down Farmer Jack's spine. He stood by the open gate, rain-soaked grass glistening like jewels beneath the impending downpour. It was a familiar sight, but today felt different, charged with a tension that gripped him tightly. What lay beyond that gate? Adventure, chaos. He remembered the last time he had left it unlatched, how the wild things had crept in, the stray dogs that chased his chickens, the way shadows seemed to deepen around his home. What had once been an invitation suddenly felt like a warning. Yet somehow, the gate whispered to him, promising the thrill of the unknown. Jack's heart pounded as he glanced back toward the farmhouse. Inside, his wife, Mary, was preparing dinner. The smell of fried potatoes floated through the air, mingling with the earthy scent of impending rain. Their two children, Emma and Tom, were laughing, unaware of the brewing storm outside. He could almost hear their voices call to him through the bustle of the house. "Dad!" Emma's cheerful shout pierced through his thoughts, reminding him of the warmth that awaited within those walls. The everyday joys of family life hummed like a soft song, pulling him back from the edge of curiosity that threatened to sweep him away. But that gate left ajar, swaying in the gusts of wind seemed to echo the forgotten dreams and desires he had buried under layers of daily responsibility. It felt like a test, challenging the very essence of who he had become. The open gate represented more than just a passage. It stood as a metaphor for opportunities lost and paths never taken. The first raindrop fell, a gentle reminder of nature's presence. Then another. Jack stepped closer to the gate, feeling the rush of the cool breeze against his skin. His boots sank into the damp earth as he battled with himself. He wondered, but the memories of chaos he had witnessed flooded back, clashing violently with that thought. The storm was building, thunder rumbling like an angry giant ready to strike. Jack's pulse quickened. He had always favored safety over adventure. He had watched neighbors tread too close to the line, pushed by their curiosity, only to suffer losses that lingered long after. Fear crept into his mind, reigning in his desire to explore. But why was he so afraid? What had his fear concealed all this time? Was it only the unpredictability of what lay outside, or was it something deeper, an unwillingness to allow himself to break free? He thought of Emma and Tom, their eyes full of wonder. How could he teach them about the world if he'd never dared to step beyond the gate himself? The lightning flashed, illuminating the landscape with fierce intensity, and for a fleeting moment, Jack felt a wild rush of adrenaline. A hound barked somewhere in the distance, snapping him back to reality. The initial thrill was quickly replaced by stern warnings of danger, and he hesitated. "No," he mumbled, shaking his head as if trying to dispel the startling thoughts. What kind of farmer leaves the gate open? He had responsibilities. The animals needed him, the land needed him. With a heavy heart, he turned away from the gate, ready to retreat to the familiar comfort of home. But just as he did, a flicker of movement caught his eye. There, just outside the gate, stood a figure, a young deer, brown-eyed and curious. Jack felt his breath hitch in his throat. It held its ground, watching him with a sense of intrigue, as if challenging him to step forward. For a moment, time paused. The storm, the gate, the worries of the world dissolved into the background. The deer took a tentative step closer, a fragile embodiment of freedom and innocence. Jack felt an urge he hadn't recognized in years, a thirst for that same kind of bravery. What if he could embrace the unknown instead of fearing it? What if he taught his children to explore the world, to appreciate its unpredictability? He glanced back toward the farmhouse, hearing laughter that bubbled like a brook. Mary would want him in there, settled and safe. But the deer's gaze held him like a spell, tugging at a part of him that longed to break free of the chains he had forged so tightly around his heart. As the rain began to fall harder, drenching the ground around him, Jack made a decision. He marched toward the gate, pushing it open as wide as it would go. The sound echoed an invitation, a declaration. The deer bounded away, leaping off into the woods, free and unrestrained. Jack felt a jolt of energy rush through him. "Kids," he called out, an unfamiliar excitement crackling in his voice. The laughter faded, replaced by curious footsteps. Emma and Tom poked their heads out, confusion mingling with the thrill of adventure. Emma asked, tilting her head. Jack exclaimed, grinning from ear to ear. Tom's eyes lit up and he quickly grabbed his raincoat, racing toward his father. Emma hesitated, glancing back at their cozy home, warmth spilling out through the windows, but desire glimmered in her eyes. She shouted, and in that moment she leaped forward, joining her brother. The three of them stood together at the open gate, hearts pounding, surrounded not by fear but exhilaration. As they stepped outside, the rain cascaded over them, filling the air with laughter and delight. Each drop felt like nature celebrating their release, a welcome to the wild beyond. They raced into the open fields, water splashing beneath their feet, clouds swirling overhead like a painting come to life. Jack felt alive, rediscovering the lost essence of living in the moment. The world stretched before them like an uncharted map, filled with vibrant colors and untold stories. They dashed through the unkempt grass, wildflowers bending beneath their joyous laughter, reveling in the simple beauty of a rain-soaked day. Tom cried, pointing to a cluster of butterflies flitting about like tiny confetti celebrating their liberation. Emma asked, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Only if we're careful," Jack replied, giving them the green light. Together, they chased the butterflies, dodging puddles and colliding with bursts of laughter. For Jack, time felt suspended as he joined in their game, the heaviness in his heart lifting with each cheerful shout. But then came a flash of lightning, momentarily freezing them in place. They huddled together for a heartbeat, eyes wide, hearts racing. The rumble of thunder followed, yet there was no fear in their voices, only exhilaration. Jack shouted, and they charged further into the wild. Each step took them deeper into uncharted territory, encouraging their spirits to soar. They climbed a small hill that overlooked their property, the expanse of land alive under the heavy rain and flashes of light. They could see everything: the fields, the barn, the farmhouse glowing against the stormy backdrop. It was in that moment, standing there with his children, that Jack realized the gate had represented more than just the outside world. It encapsulated every decision he had ever made to play it safe, the moments he had passed up in favor of responsibility. Today, he understood that living life meant dancing in the rain, allowing the storm to wash away every inhibition. As the rain began to lessen, the clouds parted, revealing a breathtaking rainbow arching across the sky. Jack felt as though he were witnessing a miracle unfold before them, a promise that beauty exists even after storms. Emma exclaimed, her eyes riveted on the colors. "I think we can," Jack responded, no longer bound by the fears that had tethered him. Together, they raced down the hill, laughter echoing, hearts lighter than air. They ventured further than they had ever dared before, following the shimmering path of the rainbow. Every step felt electric, filled with possibilities he hadn't allowed himself to believe in for far too long. They pushed through thorny bushes, ducked low-hanging branches, and stumbled upon little streams, giggling as they splashed each other. That day transformed into an odyssey of discovery, fueled by laughter and love. They built makeshift rafts to float along the streams, made wildflower crowns, and shared stories that tied them closer than ever. The weight of their lives faded into the background, a mere echo against the vibrant tapestry they were creating together. As dusk approached, golden hues flooded the skies, illuminating their surroundings with a warm, ethereal glow. Jack felt a sense of fulfillment wash over him as they sat together on a fallen log, exhausted yet euphoric. "I can't remember the last time we had this much fun," he said, glancing at his children who were still buzzing with energy. Tom declared, and Jack couldn't help but smile. When they finally returned home, the storm had passed, leaving the air crisp and fresh. The farmhouse glowed welcomingly, a beacon of warmth after their extraordinary journey. As they crossed through the gate, Jack felt a lingering sense of purpose, a realization that there would be more days like this ahead. He would leave the gate open not just physically, but in every sense of the word, allowing curiosity to flow freely into their lives. He wanted his children to learn about adventure, about the beauty hidden in the wilds beyond, and that it was okay to dance in the rain. From that day forward, Jack became a farmer not only of crops but of dreams. He encouraged Emma and Tom to explore, to wander, to discover what lay beyond their safe little world. The gate that had once seemed ominous became a symbol of possibility, a doorway to experiences that would shape their lives. Years later, as Jack stood at that same gate, he watched as Emma and Tom, now teenagers, huddled together, preparing to embark on their own adventure. The gate was open, the flowers blooming wildly around it, and he felt a swell of pride. He had transformed his own understanding of life by daring to explore. The wild called to them, the sky forgiving and expansive. They would venture far and wide, but here at this gate, the adventures began anew, a cycle of life to nurture and cherish. "Don't forget to come back," he called, waving them off with a smile. They turned, eyes filled with excitement and uncertainty. But it was a good kind of uncertainty, the kind that promised growth, discovery, and the vibrant pulse of life. Jack stood there, heart full, the gate wide open, and he knew, sometimes the fiercest storms lead to the brightest rainbows. All it takes is the courage to step through the gate. The sun dipped low over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Farmer David stood by the sturdy gate of his farm, its hinges rusted from years of exposure to the elements. Today, the gate swung open, inviting him into the wild expanse beyond the fields. A chill breeze whispered through the open space, brushing against his skin like the voice of the land. It had been a long time since it had stood open. Just a few hours earlier, it had been his son, Sam, who noticed it while tending to the cattle. Sam had exclaimed, his voice laced with the excitement of possibility. David had felt a flicker of hesitation at that moment, a gut instinct urging him to close it and maintain the safety of their little world. But here he was now, loose ends unresolved as twilight cloaked the landscape in shadows. As he stood there, memories washed over him, days filled with laughter, echoing footsteps of his children running wild across the fields. Those carefree days felt far away now, drowned in the weight of responsibilities. The open gate gleamed with the promise of adventure, but somehow it filled him with trepidation. He thought, remembering the lost sheep, the wild boars that had once threatened their crop, and the careless abandon with which he had navigated life in his youth. David mused aloud, his thoughts swirling like leaves caught in the wind. The world outside was a mystery, a blend of wild beauty and lurking danger. Part of him longed to explore, to embrace that wildness, while another part anchored him to the safety of the known. He turned to glance back at the farmhouse, warmly lit and inviting. He could see Anne, his wife, bustling about, preparing dinner, and the laughter of their children filled the air. It was familiar and comforting, yet the gate now felt like an ever-present temptation. The thought danced through his mind, tugging at the edges of his heart. Every day had become a cycle of routine, waking up before dawn, tending to the animals and ensuring the crops thrived. Yet inside him lived a smoldering ember, a yearning for something more than this life of predictability. The fears of loss loomed larger, darkening the thrill. "You'll regret it," he cautioned himself. The wind picked up, rustling through the trees, and for a brief moment it felt as though the farm itself was breathing, alive with the stories etched in its soil. Instead of closing off, perhaps he needed to embrace the open door to show Sam and Emily that there was power in exploration. Years of caution had caged him. It was time to reclaim what had been lost. Just then, a low sound echoed in the distance. A bark. David pushed open the gate wider, peering out into the dusky twilight. There it was again, a sweet, almost playful note carried by the gentle breeze. He squinted, straining his eyes against the settling darkness. Then he saw it, a playful coyote, darting across the field, its sleek body moving with grace. David's heart raced. That's what he feared could slip in, a harbinger of chaos. But as he watched, something unexpected happened. Instead of thinking of disaster, he found himself captivated by its freedom, by its defiance of boundaries. He whispered to himself, taking a step closer, drawn into the nuance of the moment. As the coyote disappeared into the tall grass, David felt something shift deep within him, an urge to break away from the chains of caution he had wrapped so tightly around his heart. Those early years of exploration and adventure flickered like fireflies in his mind, reminders of who he once was. He had forgotten that feeling, the lightness of stepping into the unknown, of accepting life's risks with arms wide open. He shouted, summoning the laughter that echoed from the house. Anne looked up, concern etched on her face, but the curiosity of their children stirred within her. Sam and Emily bounded outside, their faces aglow with excitement. Sam asked, his eyes darting to the open gate. David declared, waving them over. Emily squeaked, an almost tangible excitement in her voice. David offered, sensing the rush of courage swelling through him. Immediately, their faces transformed, the prospect of adventure igniting a light in their youthful eyes. They dashed toward him, energy palpable in the air like static electricity. As they approached that threshold, a rush of adrenaline coursed through David. Would this be a mistake? But perhaps sometimes embracing uncertainty was the most responsible choice of all. They stepped through the gate into the enchanting unknown, and with each footfall, the magic of the world wrapped around them. The air felt fresher, vibrant, shimmering with possibilities. The farm behind them felt like a memory fading into the past, while the expanse ahead promised a plethora of stories waiting to be told. David said, his voice steady, though excitement bubbled beneath the surface. Sam shouted, sprinting ahead. Emily cried, laughing as she chased after her brother. David smiled as he watched his children, their laughter ringing through the open fields. That joyous energy inspired him, pushing aside the weight of fear. They wandered deeper, the landscape morphing around them, a tapestry of colors and shapes, a forgotten wilderness alive with stories. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden rays through the trees, they stumbled upon a hidden grove. Light flickered through the branches, illuminating the wildflowers swaying gracefully in the gentle breeze. Emily exclaimed, twirling in circles, her laughter echoing like a contagious melody. David felt his heart swell at the sight of his children fully embracing the wild. They explored as if the grove had been waiting for them, this secret, untouched paradise, a place filled with possibility. As they ventured further, they discovered a small creek, glimmering like diamonds under the fading sunlight. Sam asked, eyes wide with eagerness. Of course. David watched as his children squealed with delight, splashing wildly in the cool water, the sound pure and innocent against the backdrop of nature. In that moment, David understood something profound. The open gate had not only signified a physical passage, but a doorway to their very souls. It was an invitation to seek joy, to experience all the beautiful uncertainties life had to offer. The echoing laughter of his children filled him with warmth, rescuing him from the rigid walls he had built in his mind. Laughter mingled with the symphony of flowing water as they played, and David felt the layers of worry wash away. This was living, breathing, feeling, and exploring together as a family. The storm of responsibility that had lurked in the corners of his heart subsided, replaced by a budding sense of freedom. The evening drew closer, the sun a glowing orb sinking down the horizon. David knew they would soon have to return, but the thought of it stung. Just a little longer, he whispered, as he crouched down beside Emily, who was gathering pebbles near the creek. She asked, eyes bright with hope. David replied, encouraged by her imagination. Together, they fashioned a makeshift fort from branches and stones, laughter punctuating the air as they worked together. Sam came running with a handful of flowers, eager to decorate their sanctuary, a splash of color amidst the browns and greens, a testament to their first adventure out in the wild. As night began to creak its way into the world, the first stars peeked out from behind a tapestry of darkening clouds. David cast a glance back toward the open gate, now just a silhouette against the lightening sky. There was no fear in that open ground, no worry about what could come through, only the promise of exploration, of uncharted bonds. Definitely, David replied, heart swelling. The children cheered, and he felt the deep well of warmth expand within him. As they gathered their things and prepared to leave the grove, he felt a sense of newfound purpose wash over him. Walking back, he turned to acknowledge the gate once more, a silent promise echoing in his mind. No more would he see it as a limit, but as an opening, a path to discovery and wonder. That night, as they settled in, David felt a wave of excitement. The open gate symbolized a world unbound, one filled with exploration and laughter. There would be challenges ahead, storms to weather, and unknowns lurking just around the corner. But that was part of the journey, of vibrant dance enveloped in risk and excitement. Weeks turned into months, and their adventures unfolded like a story with no end. Each exploration at the grove brought new discoveries, countless hours of laughter, games beneath the spread of the trees, and secret crafting missions that made memories sparkle like the stars above. Each return through the gate further dissolved the insecurities that had once gripped David's heart. With every escapade, his children flourished, and in turn, he rediscovered parts of himself that had long been disheveled and forgotten. The love for his family, intertwined with the love for life, became unbreakable threads. The gate, now not just a passage, but a bridge between his past and the journey ahead. One day, as they stood together looking out over the fields painted with the soft hues of dawn, David smiled at Sam and Emily, their faces bright with energy. Emily begged, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Of course. Let's see what else we can discover," he replied. And as they turned to head for the grove once more, David understood that life would always throw challenges their way. But as long as they kept the spirit of adventure alive, the gate would remain open, a constant influx of joy and new beginnings. That evening, as the day turned to night and the stars began to dot the sky, he held his children close, marveling at the journey they had taken together. In that moment, everything felt right. The gate stood open, a promise of adventure that breathed new life into their world. And with that promise came the strength to face each new day, fearless and free. The sun hung low over Farmer Henry's land, casting long shadows across the fields when he noticed the gate stood wide open. The old wooden planks creaked slightly in the gentle breeze, as if inviting the world beyond to spill into his well-ordered life. But all he felt was dread. "Not again," he murmured, tightening his grip on the pitchfork as unease settled into his gut. The last time he had left that gate unlatched, chaos had swept through like wildfire. He had lost half his flock of sheep to a pack of hungry coyotes, their cries echoing in the night, piercing into his dreams. At first, Henry focused on the stillness around him, the way the very air felt charged, alive. As he stepped closer, a flash of movement caught his eye. A rabbit hopped cautiously near the gate, the stirring weeds brushing against its sides. It paused, ears twitching as though weighing its options. What lay beyond? Thus, the eternal question nagged at Henry. What did it mean to be free? He could still hear the echoes of laughter from his daughter, Clara, as she played with the neighbor's children earlier that day. The warmth of her giggles lingered in his mind, but he couldn't shake the feeling that letting anything out of his control could lead to catastrophe. He thought of her sweet face, the brightness that filled their small farmhouse. "She depends on me," he told himself, reluctant to relinquish the cautious life he had built. Yet the gate beckoned, its open mouth inviting him to a choice, spreading before him the tantalizing unknown. What if he let Clara venture out there? What if he let her chase those wild dreams beyond his carefully drawn boundaries? The thought ignited something in him, a flicker of rebellion against the fears that had long shackled him. With a heavy heart, he took a deep breath and stepped forward, feeling the earth beneath him soft and wet from the morning dew. Every footfall drew him closer to a threshold that whispered promises of adventure and risk. But then the shadows of doubt clawed at him. What if something terrible happened? Suddenly, a low growl broke through the stillness. His heart raced as he whipped around. A dark form emerged from the thicket. There stood a coyote, eyes glinting like twin moons, muscles taut, ready to leap. Panic surged through Henry. He thought, urgency now overwhelming his fear. But in that instant, the coyote wasn't just a threat. It was a symbol of freedom, a reminder that life thrummed beyond the confines of routine. Was it possible to embrace the chaos without losing everything? He shouted, the word bursting from his lips like a warning shot echoing through the air. The call pulled him back from the brink, and he looked frantically toward the farmhouse. He could see Clara peering curiously out the kitchen window, her small hands pressed against the glass. She must have sensed his tension, for the gleam in her eyes sparkled with energy and adventure. She called, her voice bright and free, a stark contrast to the wildness that lurked beyond. He shouted back, desperation creeping in. But even as he said it, he felt the weight of his own words. The thought weighed heavy on his heart, twisting into knots of regret. The coyote remained unmoving, its gaze locked onto him as if gauging his resolve. It was the same way he had looked at prospective challenges, fearful yet fascinated. Perhaps danger was part of freedom, a way to grow. Clara's voice trembled now, laced with worry. Just when he thought he could allow that gate to remain ajar, fear clutched at him once more. His voice barked out, a plea laced with authority. But deep down, a different voice echoed, beckoning him to feel the very essence of life, to step beyond barriers, both physical and emotional. How could he teach Clara to be brave if he was constraining his world with fear? Suddenly, the coyote tilted its head. In that brief moment of eye contact, something shifted in Henry's heart. He felt a tug, as if the universe was imploring him to step onto a new path. As his gaze flickered to the open gate, a thought crystallized. What if I closed it for good? The spell broke abruptly when Clara's small figure flashed out of the house. She raced toward the gate, her golden hair streaming behind her like a banner of determination. She shouted. The sight of her wild, unrestrained stirred something primal within him. He remembered his own childhood, the green hills where each rolling wave of grass beckoned him to chase the setting sun. But adulthood had dulled those dreams, forged chains of expectation. He called out, desperation rising in his voice, but it was too late. With a burst of energy, she reached the gate and flung it wide, stepping into the wild beyond. Coyote tensed, readying for action, but Clara stood firm, eyes gleaming with a mixture of trepidation and excitement. Look, Dad, time froze. For a heartbeat, Henry felt torn between instinctively protecting her and the deeper truth that lay waiting. The coyote hesitated, caught in a moment of contemplation that mirrored his own. It felt like a chord struck in unison. Here they were on either side of that gate, both wild, both unrestrained. He shouted, but the urgency was laced with bewilderment. His daughter looked back at him, a challenge flickering in her gaze. I want to see if there's more out here. For a moment he stood there, warring with his fears, unable to move. And then, as if fate had made the decision for him, the coyote darted away into the underbrush, disappearing into the thickening twilight. Clara watched it go, her breath hitching in her throat. She cried, taking a step forward. In that moment, something snapped inside Henry. No, he thought with fierce clarity. With every ounce of courage he could muster, he stepped through the gate beside her. She asked, eyes wide with surprise. I'm coming with you, he replied, heart racing. Clara's face lit up, and she grabbed his hand with glee as they ventured deeper into the wild. The world enveloped them, a cacophony of rustling leaves and distant calls of wildlife that filled the air with untamed energy. As they ventured farther, the twilight grew thicker, shadows creeping in like whispers. The thrill of this shared adventure electrified the air around them, but uncertainty lingered. What awaited them in this untouched wilderness? They followed a narrow path that wound through the trees, their excitement mingling with a sense of danger. Branches scratched at their clothes and the air grew cooler, but Clara laughed, spinning in circles. Look, she exclaimed, pointing toward a clearing ahead. It opened up into a small glen, where a sparkling stream rushed over smooth stones, the water glinting like diamonds under the fading light. Mesmerized, Clara rushed ahead, laughing as she splashed her hands in the cool water. Henry watched her, heart swelling with a mixture of joy and fear. How far would they venture? Should he really let her explore? But as he walked closer, the beauty of the moment ignited something inside him, a flame he thought had long extinguished. He called, stepping into the glen. Clara shouted back, her laughter ringing with abandon. The tranquility wrapped around them, and in those fleeting moments he felt the burdens of his cautious life slip away. It was liberating. They splashed and played together, building small dams with twigs and stones, their laughter echoing through the woods. But just as he began to embrace the wild bliss of this newfound freedom, a rustle in the underbrush shattered the tranquility. Henry whipped around, instincts kicking in. Clara, he said, his voice dropping low. Her eyes widened, magic replaced with concern. Then they saw it, a pair of glowing eyes watching them from the shadows, piercing and watchful. The silhouette of the coyote emerged, this time not as an unthreatened observer, but an imminent threat, emboldened by their intrusion. Heart pounding, Henry felt the sense of adventure poise itself on the edge of something darker. The coyote stepped forward, and with an intensity of instinct, it growled low, a warning that echoed through the clearing. He shouted, grabbing Clara's hand as he stepped protectively in front of her. For a moment they stood frozen, the predator and the protectors, caught in an electric standoff. The wildness of the moment unfurled around them, uncertainty intertwining with fierce loyalty. Clara's eyes brimmed with fear, and Henry could feel his own rising. But this time the weight of his earlier caution flared deep within. He yelled, adrenaline surging through him. In that instant the coyote charged. Clara pulled Henry's hand, and together they fled through the glen back towards the gate, stumbling over roots, their hearts pounding. The thrill of adventure had turned dangerous. As they dashed through the underbrush, every sound felt amplified, the growl of the coyote now mingling with the pounding of their hearts. In that harrowing chase, Henry's mind raced. He finally understood the weight of the open-gate adventure held beauty and risk, and he dared to enter that space, yet now faced the consequences. They broke through the trees, heading straight for the wide-open gate, but it seemed to be closing in on them faster than they could reach it. The coyote's growl echoed behind them, forcing Henry to surge forward, pulling Clara along with every ounce of strength he possessed. Just as they reached the threshold, the ground shifted, a dark weight pressing down on them, roots grasping at their feet. The air hung thick, filling with anticipation. Would they make it back? Would the gate close behind them for good? Henry's heart thundered in his chest as he risked one last glance behind, the wild animal closing in, its eyes blazing with inner fire. The gate loomed before them. Would this be their salvation or their doom? Would it shut them away from the freedom they had so desperately sought? And a question washed through his mind. Was life meant to be lived with fear, or should they embrace the wild beauty no matter the cost? They lunged for the gate just as it began to creak closed, a heavy weight settling in the air. Henry grabbed Clara tight, ready to dive through, when he sensed the coyote's force behind them. It was now or never. As the gate started to close, would they escape the binds of fear and risk once and for all, or would the wild consume their dreams of what lay beyond? The horizon blurred between adventure and chaos, the two worlds colliding as a singular moment beckoned one last choice. The door creaked open slowly, revealing the dimly lit room inside. Leela stepped over the threshold, her heart pounding in her chest. The air was thick with dust, memories swirling around her like moths caught in the light. This was the old barn where her family had stored everything over the years: heartache, love, dreams, and forgotten hopes. She glanced around cautiously, her eyes tracing the outlines of old tools, rusted and battered, and a hayloft that seemed to whisper secrets from years gone by. Leela remembered her father telling her stories about the barn, how it had once been full of life, a meeting place for friends, laughter and music echoing beneath the rafters. But now it felt like a tomb, a place where the past lay buried beneath the weight of what was. The weather was changing outside, an impending storm casting a sepulchral gloom through the windows. She felt a pang of longing for those days of innocence, the warm sunlight bathing the barn in gold as she and her brother, Jake, played hide-and-seek among the bales of hay. That was before everything fell apart. She whispered to herself, her voice echoing strangely in the silence. But she already knew the answer. It was the gate. It had stood open for too long, and the urge to close it had grown too strong. Just outside the barn, the old wooden gate leaned slightly on its hinge, creaking softly in the wind. Leela recalled the day it had swung wide open, the day she had first felt the weight of fear and obligation begin to settle in. The family had fallen apart not long after that. Her father's sudden passing had left them all at odds, and her mother had retreated behind locked doors, closing herself off just like that gate. Leela looked up at the rafters, shadows stretching overhead like the weight of her own memories. She had come back to this old barn to face her past. The gate had become a symbol of her unresolved pain. What lay beyond it had haunted her thoughts for years. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her back to the present. It was a text from Jake. "Are you sure about this?" A mixture of fear and determination filled her. "No, Jake, I need to do this," she typed back, her fingers trembling slightly as she pressed send. She had to reclaim her truth. The weight of the unspoken was suffocating. With a deep breath, Leela approached the door of the barn. As she pushed it open wide, dust motes danced in the slants of light, filling the space with a soft glow. And that's when she heard it, a whisper, almost imperceptible, beckoning to her from the shadows. "Leela," it seemed to say, echoing across the years, sounding like her father's voice. Swallowing hard, she stepped further into the barn. The air was still, heavy with the scent of memories. She could almost imagine the laughter of her childhood ringing in her ears, her father's warm presence steadying her as she navigated the maze of emotions that had accumulated like cobwebs. What if she encountered what had been left behind, a history that both haunted and set her free? Her heart raced, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She approached an old wooden chest, its surface weathered and worn. She had seen it many times but never dared to open it. But now, it felt as if the very air compelled her to draw closer. Tentatively, she knelt beside the chest, brushing her fingers over the dusty surface. She whispered, half to herself and half to the spirits of her family that lingered in the corners. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever memories lay hidden within. With a soft grunt, she lifted the lid, and the hinges creaked like old bones. Inside, a myriad of treasures awaited her: photographs, letters, trinkets from long-forgotten times. As she rummaged gently through the items, each piece told a story. The faded photograph of her parents dancing under twinkling lights, a letter from her father detailing hopes for their future, and a rusty key that glinted ominously in the dim light. Memories surged back: her father's gentle laughter, her mother's nurturing embrace, and the warmth of love before it all crumbled. But as she sifted through the remnants of her life, a new sense of purpose ignited within her. She had allowed herself to be consumed by fear for too long. Now it was time to face her family's history head-on. Suddenly, a noise broke through the silence: a soft thud. Leela's heart raced, and she turned toward the sound. The gate was swinging closed, almost as if it had a mind of its own. She rushed to the door, her heart racing. As her hands gripped the wood, she realized she had just crossed into a part of herself that had been buried for years. The gate might close, but she would not back away from the past any longer. Just as she reached the threshold, the door slammed shut with a force that reverberated through the barn, the air thick with uncertainty. Shadows twisted in the corners, and she felt an eerie chill wrap around her, not just from the cold, but from the implications of what it meant to truly face her fears. She called, her voice breaking as she felt the air shift around her. The thrill of discovery mingled with fear, the weight of her family's unresolved heartbreak closing in like the gate. In that moment, Leela understood something profound. The barn had contained more than just memories. It held the very essence of her family's struggles, the pain she had tried to escape. Looking around, the walls seemed to pulse with stories of love, loss, and redemption, each creak in the wooden structure echoing a chapter yet to be written. Before she could process it, the ground beneath her shook slightly, as if the barn itself was alive and aware of her presence. Another thud echoed, this time louder, as if something was trying to break free from within the bowels of the structure. The voice was unmistakable. It was her father. Her heart dropped. Was it a memory or something else entirely? Panic surged through her, mixing with determination. She didn't just stand on the threshold of the barn, she stood on the precipice of her life, ready to embrace the change she had long avoided. With newfound courage, Leela stepped away from the door that had just slammed shut and walked deeper into the barn. The air grew heavy, almost palpable, swirling around her in a dance of unresolved tension. Each step carried weight. Each breath felt charged with a history that had yet to be unraveled. She approached the shadows, her heart pounding louder. She demanded, her voice steady. The shadows coiled and shifted, forming shapes reminiscent of people. "Release us," they whispered in unison, their voices a haunting melody carrying the weight of their stories, their regrets intertwining like vines wrapped around her heart. Leela's voice quivered, her heart hammering against her chest. Suddenly, the darkness swirled violently, the figures breaking apart, each one revealing a face from her past: her father, her mother, her lost childhood. Each visage spoke of longing, of desire to be remembered and loved, not left to dusk and shadows. "Face the truth," her father's image said. Tears streamed down her face as the realization hit her. It wasn't merely about the gate, it was about her refusal to confront what lay on the other side. She cried out. "No, my daughter," her father's figure replied, sadness etched in his features. "Safety can often isolate us from the life we seek." Just then, the barn shook again, thundering beneath her feet. The shadows flickered with urgency, swirling around her, tightening their grip. "You have to decide, Leela." The weight of their sorrow pressed against her, and she felt an unshakable force pulling her toward the gate once more. She could feel the energy building behind her, the echoes of her family thrumming under her skin. "Please," Leela whispered, panic rising. Suddenly, memories flooded her mind, swirling like a tempest: her father's laughter, her mother's advice, her brother's unwavering support. All those moments had built her. She understood now that the gate could symbolize the fear of danger, but also the choice for freedom. With renewed strength, Leela faced the shadows and shouted, I will release you. The barn shook, the shadows cascading around her, light flickering and dancing as they recoiled from her words. All at once, she felt an overwhelming wave of love enveloping her, the warmth lifting the weight of sorrow. She cried, her voice breaking through the shadows, and just like that, the barn exploded with light. The shadows dissipated and her father's face grew bright, joined by her mother and brother, their eyes glowing with pride. The tension melted away, a promise of hope kindling in her heart. Outside, the storm began to clear, the skies brightening. It was an omen of change, an invitation to embrace no matter the storm. Yet the gate loomed behind her, still partially closed, as if waiting for her final decision. Her father's voice rang out one last time. Heart racing, she turned towards the gate. It was time to declare her freedom, to shed the weight of the past that had held her captive. With tears streaming down her cheeks, Leela took a deep breath and began to reach for the gate. But as she reached for the latch, the ground trembled again and shadows seemed to ripple back at her. They whispered, urgency thick in the air. Leela hesitated, the weight of their question pressing heavily on her heart as the shadows gathered again, dark and foreboding. This was the moment in which it all hung in the balance. Would she lock away the pain of the past, or would she embrace it once more, willing to face whatever lay beyond the gate? The answer remained eerily silent in her mind, the storm outside swirling with uncertainty. And as Clara's laughter faded, Leela stood poised between the two worlds, the choice heavy on her heart. Was she strong enough to close that gate for good, or would she leave it ajar, allowing the shadows to linger and haunt her? And then it hit her, everything hinged upon her decision. She had the chance to unlock not just the gate, but her destiny. Leela took a deep breath, resolved to choose her path. The air crackled with potential as she set her jaw, ready to make the choice that would echo into her future. But just as she moved to thrust the latch, a final thundering crash sent shivers through the barn. The gate swung open once more, and before she could react, an otherworldly force surged through, threatening to consume her whole. In that moment, she realized the true battle lay ahead, a choice that could either bind her to the shadows or set her spirit free. Her heart raced as the world around her began to spiral, a whirlwind of emotions and memories crashing down like waves. Would she let the past win? Or would she finally face the truth, no matter the cost? Before she could answer, everything exploded into chaos, and darkness enveloped her completely. The gate had truly been opened, but what would come through would change everything.